She sat there staring at the little piece of paper like it had teeth. The cafe noise faded into a blur as her heartbeat pounded louder than all the clinking plates around her. The total at the bottom of the bill swam through the tears in her eyes. She had counted the notes in her wallet twice already and the result didn't change. Rent had taken most of it, life had taken the rest, and pride tried to swallow what little remained. She folded the bill, unfolded it again, as if numbers would magically soften. She could feel the heat of embarrassment climb her neck, afraid that any movement would draw attention, afraid that sitting still would too. She rehearsed explanations in her mind, each one collapsing before it could reach her lips. She wasn't someone who didn't pay her bills. Life just hadn't asked for her permission before becoming difficult. Across the room, the single dad waiter noticed the stillness before he noticed her face. He had learned to read tables like weather. Laughter meant sunshine, whispering meant storms, silence like hers meant a heart trying not to break in public. Balancing plates and 1,000 worries of his own, he watched her fingers tighten over the bill the way his son clutched his worn-out backpack straps on the first day of school. He knew that look too well, the look of calculating dignity, wondering how much of yourself you can sell to get through a day. The sleeves of his uniform were rolled just enough to prove he didn't have time for pretenses, only for work and whatever tomorrow demanded of him. She inhaled slowly and finally stood up, the chair scraping louder than she wished. She walked toward the counter, each step feeling like it carried the weight of her entire story. Words tangled in her throat. She opened her wallet again, fanned out the few notes as if they could multiply by air alone. She wanted to say she'd come back tomorrow, or that something had gone wrong with her card, or that she was sorry, so deeply sorry, but apologies sounded heavier than debt. She placed the wallet back slowly, her hands trembling despite her effort to look composed. Tears threatened, and she blinked hard, pressing them back like a dam patching leaks. He reached the counter at the same time she did, as if guided by an invisible thread. Before she spoke, he gently turned the bill toward himself, scanning it without changing his expression. She opened her mouth, but he shook his head just slightly, not in refusal, but as if saying, "You don't have to explain." He'd seen explanations before. They came wrapped in shame, in nervous laughter, in shaking voices. He didn't want that for her. Without a word, he slid his own worn wallet from his apron. It didn't look like it held much, just responsibility folded thin, but he took out what he had and placed it on the counter with a quiet certainty that made the world pause for a moment. She froze, not out of pride this time, but out of disbelief that kindness could still arrive without announcement. I didn't, she began, but the words fractured. He simply offered a calm, soft nod, as if paying a bill for a stranger was no more surprising than refilling a glass of water. His silence wasn't cold, it was protective, covering her like a blanket from the eyes of the world. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't ask for her name. He didn't ask for promises. He acted as though compassion was just part of the job no one trained him for. In that silence, her throat burned, not from humiliation now, but from the shock of being seen without being questioned. She wanted to tell him everything, the lost job, the long nights, the quiet battles fought in small apartments, but something about his expression told her he already understood, not the details, but the weight. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself, because gratitude can feel as heavy as grief when it arrives suddenly. The world kept moving around them, orders being called, cups being stacked, but they stood in a small island of understanding. He handed the paid receipt to her without ceremony. No speeches, no dramatic pauses. Just a simple gesture that said, "You can go. With your dignity." His eyes held warmth but also a tiredness that came from his own life full of unpaid sleep and unspoken worries. She noticed a small drawing peeking from his apron pocket, a child's stick figure family, and realized he wasn't someone with abundance to spare. He was someone who knew exactly what it cost to help and chose to do it anyway. "Thank you," she whispered, not trusting her voice to climb any louder. The words felt too small for what he'd done, like trying to wrap a storm in ribbon. He gave a tiny smile, the kind that begins and ends in the eyes, before turning back to his work. There were still tables waiting, still plates to clear, still a world that didn't pause for kindness. But she stayed there for a second longer, holding the receipt the way someone might hold a letter that changed the direction of their life. As she walked toward the door, she passed by families laughing, couples sharing desserts, friends arguing about nothing important. Life went on, but something inside her had shifted. She had come in carrying the fear of being judged. She was leaving carrying a story, a reminder that strangers sometimes become chapters. She glanced back once more, watching him tie his apron tighter, moving from table to table, as if nothing remarkable had happened at all. What she didn't see was the way he paused for half a heartbeat after she left, leaning lightly on the counter as if steadying himself. It wasn't easy for him. Being a single dad meant counting every coin twice. It meant nights where dinner was whatever was left after making sure a little plate across the table was full. But he had made a promise to himself long ago, on a night when he couldn't pay something either, that if he ever had just enough to survive, he would use it to make someone else feel less alone in the world. His son's face flashed through his mind, the way the boy asked why some people looked sad in restaurants. He had answered once, because sometimes life is heavy. Today, he'd added a silent answer of his own, and sometimes we get to make it lighter. He pocketed the receipt, not as proof of money spent, but of a lesson lived. She stepped out into the air that suddenly felt different, cleaner somehow. The city didn't know what had happened. Buses still roared by, street vendors still called out, clouds still wandered lazily overhead. But she did. She pressed her hand over her heart like she was trying to keep the moment from blowing away. She promised herself that if life ever gave her the chance, she would be someone's quiet rescue too. Later that night, she sat at her small kitchen table with the lights low, the receipt still beside her tea like a keepsake. For the first time in weeks, her tears fell without bitterness. Gratitude softened them. She didn't know his name, but she whispered a blessing over him and the child whose drawing had been tucked in his pocket, sending silent hope across a city that didn't see the invisible threads tying strangers together. He returned home to the sound of little feet running toward him. His son's laughter wrapped around his tired body better than any rest could. They ate together, talked about school, about superheroes, about nothing and everything. He didn't mention the bill he'd paid. Kindness, to him, wasn't a story to brag about, it was something you quietly folded into your life. When his son fell asleep, small hands still clinging to his shirt, the waiter sat for a moment in the quiet apartment. He looked around at the simple furniture, at the drawings taped crookedly to the walls, at the life they had built from scraps of resilience. He didn't feel poorer for what he had spent. He felt richer, in a way money couldn't measure. Somewhere else in the city, she smiled to herself at the memory of his silent nod. She realized that not every hero arrives with grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Some just wear aprons, roll up their sleeves, and stand beside you when your world feels like it's cracking. Days passed, but the moment didn't fade. It settled into both of them like a gentle echo. He kept working. She kept going. Life continued its complicated dance, full of bills and worries and unexpected kindnesses. She came back weeks later, not because she had to, but because her heart led her to the same cafe door. She didn't know if he would be there, but he was, carrying plates, calm and steady as always. This time, she had enough. More than enough. She left a tip that was bigger than her bill, tucked beneath a note that simply said, "For the day you said nothing and gave me everything." He found it at closing time. He read the note slowly, the way someone reads a prayer. He didn't chase after her. He just smiled to himself, understanding that kindness has a way of circling back, not as payment, but as proof that it mattered. And so the story remained between them in the quiet walls of a small cafe, a reminder that sometimes the loudest words are the ones never spoken, that dignity can be protected by silence, and that a single dad waiter with tired eyes and a generous heart can change a life simply by paying a bill, without a word.